we just generally ask that, like, is it a leftist film? That's not like makes it good or bad. Just like we're just taking the temperature of the film.
Is it an explicitly leftist film? This is explicitly leftist podcast.
It's a question we're going to ask.
There is no left Hollywood. There's liberal Hollywood, and the right likes to conflate these things.
What a glorious time.
You mean peak COVID?
All right, well, when you put it that way.
What a glorious, lots of free time to watch movies and record time, for sure. We're already up to speed. We know what's going on here. We're just waiting for him to get in there and strangle him with his dick again. So let's get to that scene.
Let's do this.
I don't know what his politics were at this point. I mean, I know he sort of gets all Maoist-y when everybody gets Maoist-y, but I mean, who didn't?
Okay. Oh, the 58 coup. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry. That's not CIA.
This is a werewolf episode, God damn it.
Just not the one you were hoping for.
Yeah, and when that happens, when the werewolf comes out, you're like, God damn, all right, this movie's awesome.
Victor Ostrovsky, the screenwriter on that, former Mossad agent.
Oh, wow.
Not sure what needs to be unpacked there, but...
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of fuckery here. How many people have you tortured?
Well, that doesn't really change how fucked the system is. We don't have time for baby steps right now.
Because when I watch a Godard movie, I kind of like, this is very smart. I'm very impressed with your form. I want to slap you. You feel so fucking smug.
Well, do you think this is a leftist film?
No, not at all. We're going to have to atone for this movie.
Lead a open rebellion, then the camp gets napalmed, and then revolution, I guess? Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff.
Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this show, we believe films are never neutral. There's a political as well as an artistic message captured in every film, in every country, and in every time period, and we're on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller, and on this episode, we don't have to look very hard. The fact that this is a political film, though what it's doing is a little harder, because on this episode, we're looking at comedy, and specifically, we're looking at the dark comedy of Exterminating Angel from 1962 by Louis Buñuel.
It's interesting, though, the tags for this, at least on Letterboxd, are drama, comedy, fantasy, which I guess are accurate.
Yeah, it's one of these things where, like, the category of fantasy isn't really enough to contain it, or as we think about that category.
That's true, too. But after our previous episode, the Palestinian experience on film, both documented and represented, it was necessary at the end of that episode, as we mentioned, to get to this film and to some comedy. And here we are.
It's always pleasurable to make fun of the bourgeoisie.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're targeting them in Franco's Spain. Jesus. I mean, I realize it's a Mexican movie technically, but it's set in Spain, right?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get into that. That might just be the good prompt right here, because I just have it written down as bullet points as the career of Buñuel through the years, through the decades, is kind of a fascinating track of often, I don't know, a high ratio of just like, damn, masterpiece level stuff that I've seen, which is not a ton of his stuff. But he also has moved around enough that there's a whole lot of like, oh, what could have been within his career. Because you start off with his French period where you have Un Chien Andalou and L'Age d'Or, and then you have a Spanish period for a few years. Then you have about a 10-year period in the United States. And then you have another like 10 plus year chunk in Mexico. And then he's kind of floating around doing international work here and there. And then the last 10, 15 years or so, it's even just tagged, I think, on some biography I was reading of his as like final films. And you're like, that's like a 15-year period you're talking about here from, kind of Belle de Jour onward, where it's just, bang, bang, bang. But that said, yeah, it's almost the amalgamation we talked about on our previous episode of Palestinian films with the dupes, where you have a director of a certain nationality tackling an author of a certain nationality with a story set in a different country. Like, it's a really interesting overlap of sensibilities, and it doesn't really matter in this particular case of the Exterminating Angel. I don't think it necessarily matters where it's set at as an allegory kind of film. I think it just works, period.
I think it works, period, but I think where it's set is actually really important. And I think it's not an accident that it's the country that he was exiled. He's not only from,
right.
Could not go back to.
Yeah.
At this point.
It's one of those, I even put a note, I think, in when I was doing my notes here, that that it works so well as a metaphorical allegory, even if you don't know the political context of the period or the country or the time it's taking place in, it will still work for you. If you're like Franco, Spain, what do I have to read about before I watch this movie? You can, and it will help, but you also don't have to, and it will still crack you up.
Yeah, no, I think it still works either way. I mean, I think, but so I don't know a lot about Franco Spain. I definitely don't know a lot about it in the early '60s. I mean, I know more about the Spanish Civil War and this sort of like, well, what, but the noticeable connection to the Catholic Church
Yeah.
and the way that, but I think, the constant poking at both their relationship to sex along with their relationship to sort of bourgeoisie's relationship to both. Well, all right. I mean, the sort of relationship to the church in a formal sense and the relationship to forms of bourgeois propriety, which like is what's being made fun of in the movie, are sort of inextricable. So I feel like this is a very particular bourgeoisie or the sort of ruling element or wealthy class that's being targeted, right? But
Mhm.
we can extrapolate a lot of these things out to for other places as well.
Right.
It's also sort of interesting because the last movie of his that I watched was his other dinner in the bourgeoisie movie,
The discreet charm of the bourgeoisie.
The Discreet Charms of the Bourgeoisie, which is so different. I mean, is also absurdist, is also involves meals that don't happen or meals that, like some sort of, but is also like you get this feeling of being, like it's 10 years later on the other side of the 60s, and this is a much more sort of barely functional or like
Yeah.
much more, like I mean, in that the deal is they're actually just they're making their money off of drug dealing. And in this, these are people, well, you never deal with how they made their money other than like people like the doctor or,
Right.
like the composer, but they're also seemingly, I mean, at the very highest echelons of society.
Where I think a couple people kind of invited in or invited along
Yeah.
to kind of, I don't know, show off, I guess, at a certain point. Well, before we jump in as well, Buñuel, massive figure in international film and film history. Do you remember your first exposure? Like, what was your first Buñuel film?
I mean, I'm not deep into his filmography because I'm weird on my, it's like I've seen more Charles Burnett than I have Godard, and that's fine.
Yeah.
This is the first one actually. And I saw it probably as a teenager, maybe at the Cleveland Cinematheque.
Okay.
And my dad took me, if I remember correctly, but this was my first one. And the image of the sheep and breaking into the walls to get the water
Yeah.
never left me.
Okay.
Like it just never went. I just could never forget that.
It's interesting because, and I think that speaks to the visual nature of his storytelling as well, that I also have very distinct visual memories that have never left me. The first one of his that I watched was freshman year at film school. And we're doing History of the Motion Picture Part One. We are covering the silent era internationally, and we watched Un Chien Andalou. And that eyeball getting sliced with a razor really leaves a mark on. I was 17 years old when I started college, and that leaves a mark on you. Let alone like when they're pulling two baby pianos with dead mules on that. Like there's a plenty of stuff in that movie where you're like, what is good? The ants crawling out of the palm of the hand. There's a lot of arresting imagery in that film. I still couldn't tell you really what it's about. It's sort of not the point of that movie. But that image, the eyeball image, has never ever left.
Right.
And then I think I watched Belle de Jour because at a certain point, Martin Scorsese was doing theatrical re-releases like Martin Scorsese Presents style, like classics of world cinema. And I got to see that on the big screen, and that was equally impressive. But I went back because it's just short. I went back and watched Un Chien again after watching Exterminating Angel and was like, yep, still packs a punch. That is still, 1929, almost 100-year-old movie at this point, and it still knocks you out of your seat when you're watching it. Pretty impressive bit of work. But it's also he's a director that I need to actively pursue more stuff because I have not seen most of his output.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'm looking. It's like Verdun or Verdun. I'm not going to say that right. And the point is like there's a whole. It's one of these things where he's been on my to watch list for like a long time, and if I look at my like special '60s list that I've been working through for the last years, it's there,
Yeah.
but I just haven't sort of sat down to do it. And this is sort of a reminder that I need to do that because, there's something almost hard for me at this point to watch movies from, the 50s, 60s, 70s, but especially this is true with European cinema, but not, well, no, with European cinema, all these things are done in a context in which there is a strong left,
Mm-hmm.
and that adds a particular something, even if the filmmaker isn't necessarily going to necessarily represent all those politics, certainly not on a party line sense, but it's something in the atmosphere, right? And they might even be doing against it. I'm not here. I don't think that's at all what's happening, but it's almost hard to watch those because we live in such a different world. It almost hurts.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm following.
It's that I'm sort of watching something from a time in which there is more political hope.
Oh, okay.
The audacity of this particular critique, or the sort of the creativity of the way that he's going at them. It feels like there's a confidence in it that
This will do something.
no,
Kind of
just
thing.
yeah. I mean, not even that it'll do something, but that there's a confidence in it. There's a sharpness to it in the sense that that critique feels more in the broader culture. Or I mean, in the case where he's doing it, I mean, Spain is not a particular easy place to do this. Mexico in this period potentially. I don't mean it that way. I just mean in general. These are people who are going to be, whether they're in the left or not,
Mm-hmm.
will be affected by the existence of it in their critiques of capitalism and the wealthy and ruling classes.
Okay.
Whereas today, I mean, certainly such critiques occur, and we can sort of talk about, let's say, recent American attempts to critique rich people.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of this sort of holistic or comprehensive bite isn't there. I mean, with this, part of it is there's just such a knowingness to the way that he sort of, methodically takes them apart.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I see what you mean now.
Yeah. And, like American style liberalism just is not capable of doing that.
Right. And then also I think 'cause I threw a few in the doc just off the top of my head. I didn't dive too deep research wise, but Elysium, I think Knives Out to a certain extent. Joker for sure, Ready or Not. I haven't seen The Hunt. Ones that come out of Hollywood of various budgets, usually small, because Hollywood is essentially just, Star Wars and Marvel and Pixar at this point, that seem like they're trying to say something or trying to make commentary on class or inequality, economic inequality, things like that, are almost like trying to make this all-encompassing statement rather than, like you said, maybe just present something and take it apart piece by piece, the way Buñuel's doing here. But that's also coming out of Hollywood. If we then sticking with just Hollywood, Hollywood just rewarded Parasite with the Film of the Year award. Not a Hollywood film, but I think is at a Buñuel level of kind of taking apart and picking apart and I don't know, I think comedically taking a look at class.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it's actually, I mean, yeah, Don't Look Up
Oh,
attempts to
don't look
do.
up. Sure. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
I actually think Knives Out is the closest, in some ways. Um, I mean, obviously Parasite is actually like a direct descendant of this, right? Like this,
Yeah, I was thinking about it a lot while I was watching this.
but like I think in the sense that it is a close analysis of a particular group of rich people, a particular sort of sociology of them, and ripping into it, right? And Knives Out does that in both the first and second one. Does it do it as effectively as this? Absolutely not.
No, 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 no. But yeah,
But that's not fair in a sense. But like I think Knives Out is an attempt to do that in both the Trumpian moment and sort of in a critique, then the second one sort of a critique of sort of the of the Elon Musk overlord style. But this is also like a critique of, I think, a particular, well, I was saying this before. I think this is a critique of a particular ruling class that can be extrapolated out to lots of different contexts.
hmm
Um, I mean, part of it is the bourgeoisie is a cultural formation in the sense that it's formed in the 19th century in Europe, as opposed to the aristocracy, which, as a ruling class, which is, the actual sociology of opposing it to aristocracies is more complicated than that, right? And obviously, it's a formation that doesn't actually exist anymore in a cultural sense, but does exist in an economic sense. So sort of a distinctive bourgeois culture, certainly, I mean, I think the United States, this is more true than in other places probably, but like has been eaten up by popular culture. This grouping that we're seeing in this movie, I'm calling them bourgeois, but actually like it's not 100% clear, you know, who they all are class wise. I mean, I think they are all bourgeois in the sense of being, you know, broadly, but of course in the Spanish context, I mean, they're monarchists, right? They're going to be highly reactionary politically. And that's brought up, right? They don't when they're talking, when the women are talking about seeing bodies and how seeing poor people pancake doesn't affect you as much as seeing the Spanish, the Spanish prince die, and who was of course our good friend,
Right, right.
right? And well, I don't actually feel like the poor who are like bulls, basically, actually even or the working masses even feel the way that we do. This is this is a very specific set of political and ideological formations, but also that sort of view of lower classes is basically not even the same species of you as you. That's pretty common.
Are you saying specifically to Franco Spain or just to that class?
No, I think to the class, right?
Class,
Like,
yeah.
like it's not like Elon Musk doesn't think about the workers in his factories that differently.
I see what you mean. Yeah. It's pretty, yeah, yeah. At a certain tier, it's just like, I don't know, it's an ant colony below you that's getting shit done, or robots in your factory.
How do they relate to the servants in the house, right? For the brief period that they're there.
Right. Yeah, it's just like, oh, stuff's not getting done. Or even the one of the opening scenes when like a tray of, I think it's tray of food is dropped or whatever. It's treated as oh, that's a bit of entertainment.
That's such an interesting bit because like when the tray of food is dropped, they're so disdainful toward their hosts as well, right?
Hmm.
So here your hostess has proudly talked about what's going to be on the menu, which of course she didn't prepare in any way. But being being a how being the wife in this sort of household means managing the kitchen, right? And so she's very excited for what this is going to be. And when it doesn't work, when it gets trashed, her friends, quote unquote, none of them are sympathetic. They just laugh.
Right.
None of them care. When the host tries to give a toast, none of them care. I mean, so part of it, I mean, we can jump into sort of like what's being done, right? Like, what does it say? What is he trying to say about these people? And you see it right at the beginning where they're just, they're deeply sort of hollow and disdainful toward everyone around them, right? Everything is sort of various types of backbiting or various types of sort of like cruel insinuations. I think, does anybody care about anyone here? Are they capable of it?
I kept thinking it was maybe like there's a lack of sincerity, but I don't know if that's the right word. It really, I mean, it's a foreign idea to me. Like I've had dinners with friends, but they've never had, you know, other humans serving the food. It's the people that I was like going to visit at their house were like making the food, or you jump in and help, or everybody brings a dish or something like that. I've also never been to a party where there's a trained bear and a couple of sheep. They're going to be, hauled out at one point for a goof. It's a very foreign situation to me, so it immediately rang comical to me, which I think was also sort of Buñuel's point. But it also just seemed like I couldn't get a grasp. Like nobody feels like they're friends. Are they just here out of social obligation because someone else within their class has invited them over for this thing? So it's something you do.
I mean, that's sort of what it feels like, right? Well, part of it is this is an impromptu party because he has been driven that night to invite them all after the opera. These are just a bunch of people who, they all know each other in various ways, it seems like, but a lot of them don't know each other. And so it's the people from that class who happen to be at the opera, it seems like. So we should actually say what happens here. We're sort of talking about the party before things get weird, but we should probably lay out like the actual like the weirdness.
Well, it yeah, I hadn't it hadn't It didn't give me the vibe that it was an impromptu party, but yeah, I guess because since it starts with they're inviting everybody over after night at the opera, we don't see like an invitation process. It does seem a little bit more like spur of the moment idea. But the way the food and all the layout of the evening goes, it seems like there was some time and thought put into it. But also, I'm not sure that really Buñuel cares. Like that's not really sort of the point
Yeah, I don't think he cares very
of
much.
it at all.
'Cause
At all. So it ends up being 18 people getting together at this lavish mansion. The servants, in the roles within the house, the servants, for no real believable, I guess, reason, just start leaving. And when they are asked, like, where are you going? Like, oh, I gotta see my sister or whatever. It's all kind of like vague, and you're kind of left with the feeling of what's going on here, which he's going to play with throughout the course of the film. And then essentially the folks that are over for dinner are all trapped, not physically. You never see like a steel door drop or anything like holds them into the room, but they're all trapped within the house. Not really trapped, maybe they're unable to leave, we'll say. There's no actual angel like sprinkling magic dust keeping everybody in the house. They're just like compelled to stay and they don't really know why.
So they're compelled to stay in like basically the sitting room,
Sitting room, yeah,
right? They cannot leave. The servants have all been compelled to leave,
except one.
except for the butler,
Yeah.
right? Who identifies most deeply with them, right? He buys in ideologically.
Which actually is a new word I learned in this movie. His title is the Major Domo,
Oh,
which I didn't know that was a thing. It's just, the head staff running a household.
yeah, I've heard the term major domo before, and I've never.
I actually looked it up this time because I was like, is that his name? Is he a major? Wait, what? Why? And then looking at it, I was like, oh, okay, there we go.
So part of it, so they're trapped in there for what, like a week, and you slowly see them fall apart, right?
Is it really a week?
It's at least
I mean, it's several days, but okay, yeah.
it's at least 5 days. I think it's longer. And I think, they survive by eventually like breaking into the walls to get water pipes. And the hostess had prepared a joke for a joke in which somehow a bear cub and sheep were supposed to be involved, but when she realized that one of the guests didn't like jokes, she canceled it. So they're able to survive by some of the sheep wandering in and then, starting a fire and eating them. But, we see them as basically their sort of bourgeois cultural niceties fall apart.
Yeah. And not immediately either. It's a bit of like somebody plays a piano sonata one night and everyone's just like, oh, it's time to go home. I'm tired. And then they all just like, well, let's just sleep right here. Like it's not oh no, I'm trapped like immediately. And it's a slow things fall apart. But also one thing he's doing in the film to give you little hints that something is up here is there's some little editing tricks, some little editing playfulness that we get right down to when at the very beginning of the film, when the guests are arriving, I forget which two guests, but two of the guests, we see them arrive twice and go up the steps. I think it's like as they're arriving to head up to the dinner area, we're like, I just watched them come in. So it's a little interesting visual trick he's using to kind of get us a little off our footing as well and just keep, I don't know, surrealism is obviously associated with Buñuel throughout his whole career. It doesn't really seem like a surrealist film visually the way maybe like Un Chien Not Andalou was or something like that, but it does have these touches where you're like, wait, we just saw that, didn't we? Like there's a toast they do twice early on as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's two entrances, I think, for them coming in. There's two toasts. And then, part of it is they're trapped in there, but they don't realize they're trapped in there at first. So they keep, and, the idea of staying there that late, this is completely not done, right? Like that socially, you're not supposed to do this, da 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 da. And so they're sort of remarking on how strange this is. And I love the improvisation of this. That we will, this is the first night where they don't realize that they're trapped. They
Right.
literally cannot leave. And that no one else can come in. Nobody else can come into the house. Everybody is repelled from it during this whole period.
Mm-hmm.
Until the last day when the servants mysteriously come back, start coming back, and then they figure out a way to get out.
but like it's, like, so they, they sort of remark on how strange we're acting, how strange, why are we doing this or this or this? Oh, taking off your, your waistcoat and everything is, how absolutely gauche. Well, but we have to protect our guests, so we'll do the same thing.
Right.
Um, at the same time, like, I mean, part of it, yeah. So like you start to notice the fraying there, and the, why are we acting so strange?
Hmm.
And then it sort of goes from there.
And how like civility is kind of upheld with like you said, little examples like taking off our coat or whatever. And it's sort of upheld as long as there are a certain amount of supplies. But as supplies dwindle, there's no more water. The functionality of being a human in one location where there isn't a bathroom comes into play. So it's like, okay, the closet's where we, take a dump and relieve ourselves. It's also where people go in to have sex at one point, I think, in the same closet. You see everything kind of slowly, the societal norms kind of start to break down for these people to the point where at a certain point there's fights break out, there's sexual assault, like it devolves over these few days to very base human instincts.
It devolves in the base human instincts. Well, they talk about, I mean, I think it's the host, especially at one point, talks about, these are the breakdown of all of the things that he has enjoyed since he was a child in terms of cleanliness and orderliness. Like you get deep into sort of the psychology of how, and they're all different, right? And we can't really run through every single one of them and what they sort of seem to represent, or what they are. But these are sort of these deeply held norms,
Hmm.
um, that are sort of breaking down. But of course, we saw that a lot of them were hypocritical at the beginning of the party. Like we knew this was sort of bullshit from the beginning, but now it like feels much. You see, the seams falling, the sort of the teeth bared toward each other, right? And a good faction of them, of the men, assume that somehow it's their male host's fault that this is all happening. So, toward the end, they want to kill him, and the sort of the doctor who happens to be there is sort of like representing sort of like scientific rationality
Yeah.
in sort of constantly trying to push back against, well, if we just kill this guy, we'll get out of here. Um, at the same time, like fairly early on, the hostess and her her side piece, her lover, just are sort of open about it,
Hmm.
and her husband just doesn't care. Then he hooks up with somebody else, and just nobody really remarks on it. Like it's
Well, that's interesting because I assume that stuff is going on when just they're going around about their normal day to day, ruling class existence kind of thing. But like in secret off to the side or whatever. But now you have to do the same sort of things, but all in one room where everybody knows what's going on, like out in the open.
right at the same time that you maintain so many of these things.
Yeah. So that's part of it too. You're seeing it kind of the expectations of how, or I guess how they've been normally living their lives, they're just sort of ignoring a lot of what's actually going on around them, even within their own social circle. And now they're forced to confront it to a certain extent because it's happening right in front of them rather than in a side room when his wife's out of the house or at some other, location X versus here or someplace. So it's kind of forcing them to confront their actual behavior and their actual instincts as society within this one room starts to break down as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
Like
what works as, the whole metaphorical allegory thing. This is how it comes into play and is really interesting. You can read that in our 2023 eyes with a certain amount of insight. And like you said, it can, at the start of the show, it also makes sense if you know the political context in which Buñuel was setting the story and doing it in the first place as well.
I mean, it's sort of like an actually like meaningful Lord of the Flies. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
because I've never thought very highly of Lord of the Flies because I think it's a lot of times read as sort of like human nature will do this, which is like bullshit. Like people will not necessarily do this. But
Well, it's a
maybe,
specific type of human nature, though, in that one. Like, it's
yeah.
the uninhibited, like, child.
Well, and it is, but like I also don't even know. Like, I mean, the way that that's read. I mean, what it is, you know, British middle class boys. And yeah, I wouldn't trust them either. Like boarding school kids, they're socialized in a particular way. These are
True.
people who are socialized in a particular way and have a relationship to the labor of others in a
Hmm.
particular way. they already are like catty and vicious toward each other, but just in different ways than they're now. They are at that point, right? The point they get when things get worse and worse and worse, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting where spirituality comes into this. Both, one of them has chicken feet on hand and apparently is into Kabbalah. At one point, one of them during the initial party, I think it's the singer Letitia, who's also like a virgin, and some people are talking. Is she the one who's the virgin? And they're like talking like, like that's the perversion that she's like maintaining her virginity just for like whatever reason. But
Yeah.
I think she's the one who like breaks a window, and somebody's like, "Was it passing Jews?"
I missed that line.
Yeah, I mean it's very but like one of them is also like into Kabbalah. Like she has like so she's like starts doing like openly like mystical rites with several of the other women.
Yeah, anything to try to break this curse of trapping us in this room.
Yeah, and then a bunch of them are also like doing you know saying what they'll do under under Catholic teachings. So it's like you see everybody responds very differently. A lot of the men do so through bluster and anger, the women through retreating to sort of religiosity, to a certain degree. The young couple that was supposed to get married, I mean they're not that young, but like they were supposed to get married, end up just having sex in the closet a lot and then kill themselves.
Yeah, but not in like it didn't feel tragic to me.
Well, that's because they're the class enemy.
Yeah, and I don't care for any of these people. When you mentioned Lord of the Flies, there were a couple of films that came to mind that I was comparing this to in my head as far as like great, like metaphorical or allegorical stories. Have you ever seen Milos Forman's movie The Fireman's Ball?
I've seen part of it, but I've actually never seen the whole thing.
I mean, it's a good one too because it's all in one location and it's a big annual ball that the small town's volunteer fire department throws. But it's satirizing the Czechoslovakia form of the communist system from his era. But so it's one of those that you can watch it and it's a great comedy of manners, kind of satirical film. But if you know a bit more about, the Czech New Wave and the kind of the political history of what was Czechoslovakia, it's got a nice bite to it. Or even more controversially, I would say the more recent Darren Aronofsky film Mother is the same way, where it works on just its film level of I think being engaging, entertaining, although again not funny the way this one is, but is also clearly about something else.
Yeah, but how many of these reach? I mean, we are not capturing the level of subtlety at play here.
No. Fireman's Ball maybe, but it's been a minute since I watched that one. This one's also you watched it twice. I've only seen it once, but it's very dense and quick.
Right.
So like even some of the lines you were just mentioning, I was like, oh, I remember that scene, but I don't remember that line at all too. Part of it is a language barrier where I'm reading the language on screen and I'm also watching it. So that's one of those that you need to go through. And I need to go through 2 or 3 times before I feel like I've really got the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it's a movie you have to watch several times before even starting to catch everything that's going on there.
I mean, it's a very rewarding one-time watch, but the more you watch it, the more you're going to get out of this one.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is, there's vicious blows against bourgeois propriety and morality, against their views of other human beings, against their views of sort of each other and the speed at which they would start to eat each other up.
Yeah.
And then it ends with with them going to church.
Well, before we jump into the hilarious ending, Isaac, and also the possibly greatest sequel that was never made, there was a quote that Roger Ebert had when this movie came out that said, obviously the dinner guests represent the ruling class in Franco's Spain, having set a banquet table for themselves by defeating the workers in the Spanish Civil War. They sit down for a feast only to find it never ends. They're trapped in their own bourgeois cul-de-sac. Increasingly resentful at being shut off from the world outside, they grow mean, restless, and then their worst tendencies are revealed. So I think that maybe speaks to of the moment, like people were aware of what Buñuel was satirizing.
Oh, yes.
At the time of its release. Again, like you said, this was during his Mexico period, as far as where he was living and working, but with a tremendous amount of creative freedom at the point he was doing this one.
Yeah, that's I was gonna say rare Ebert win, but that's not true. We love
No,
Ebert.
no, you're just being cynical now.
Well, there's so many. It's like you love Ebert and you wish you wrote as well as he did, but also there's so many times where you're like, yeah, but like where it's like you didn't like that movie.
Yeah, actually, so Ebert and Pauline Kaler too, just because I have a whole bunch of their books here next to me, although this is a audio podcast, you can't see it. I usually check to see what they had written about any of the movies that we're discussing. Just, I like reading their opinions, even if I don't agree with them. You are correct. I watched recently, because we're recording this just after the holidays here. He passionately argued that Home Alone 3 was the best movie of the Home Alone series.
I don't know, man. I
So
don't know.
it's interesting.
I mean, it's a choice.
I'm not going to watch that movie, so maybe he's right.
I mean, maybe.
But
Uh,
no, I think his review for Exterminating Angel was very insightful and really interesting, and actually was a lot of kind of what we already touched on in the light touch of satire. Even though he called it the light touch of satire, but I think it's pretty like slathered on in
it's
this one.
not light. It's vicious. It's
Vicious is the better
absolutely
way.
vicious.
Yeah, that's the better way to describe it for sure.
It is just jab after jab at these people's hypocrisy, at their, their I don't know, yeah.
Well, and I think as we head
Politics.
into the ending of this one too, there's a tendency watching it with 2023 eyes where people might want like a definitive answer. Like, well, what was keeping them in the room? Like, you never get it here. And I love it. It doesn't need to be like, again, like, oh, steel doors were shut and they couldn't leave until they learned a lesson, like Squid Game style or something. Like, it's not that kind of a story. It's just they get so desperate for how the fuck do we get out of this room? Like you said, there was anything like, well, let's just kill the host. That's what's keeping us here. Superstitions come out, religious ideas come out, and then eventually we end up just getting the was it Blanca, the who does the piano sonata early on in the film? They just
Yeah.
basically they just recreate the first night and what they think is like, oh, if we just recreate the first night, maybe we'll be able to leave at the end of that the way that we weren't able to leave at the end of the first night.
Right.
Which I guess you could interpret that as working because then, like you said, the servants start to come back in, they are able to leave, and they're like, oh, we should say too that this is a bunch of assholes from high society. They're trapped in this house for days, up to a week, like we were saying. There is a crowd outside that can't get in.
Well, the local authorities are there. They try to they I get the person who's looking after some of their kids, which is like a priest actually. Like, and they talk about this guy, right? They talk about him as a hypocrite because he's actually just trying to sleep with the mother in the household. But it like brings the kids there, and they try to get one of them to go through, but he won't do it. Like they people see the bear wandering around, especially on the last day, and like one of the servants is like, no, the bear's fine, please don't shoot the bear, it's perfectly peaceful. Like, the authorities are fully aware that they cannot get in for some reason, and this is weird. It's interesting. This is like it's a media circus.
Right. Which isn't like really played up. There's a few scenes just to let you know what's going on outside. These are people that are noticeably absent from other high society shindigs or whatever. So there is a bit of a crowd there that's there. And then, they walk out. Like you said, the servants are kind of drawn back into the mansion. There isn't really a lot of wrap up, and I don't think there needs to be of, hey, there's a dead body in this room. There, like the things that have actually happened. It's pretty much hey, we can leave the what'd you call it? Like the kind of the lounge room, whatever. And then, oh, okay, we can leave the whole mansion then. And to give thanks for we escaped. Our salvation has come. They go to a church service.
Is it the funeral?
I don't remember there being a funeral. They're just at a big cathedral, right?
Well, I was wondering because is it the funeral for the people who killed themselves? Because though they wouldn't
No.
they wouldn't excommunicated for that. It looked like everybody was in black, but I could be wrong.
Oh, I'm not sure. I thought it was more of like oh my God, we made it through this ordeal and we're so important in this society. There's a whole like church service going on now. But the comedic beat is that like, well, now they can't leave the church.
Yeah, well, nobody can leave the church, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly,
everyone that's in there can't leave.
the priest, and meanwhile, you can see the police attacking the crowd outside.
Mm-hmm. Firing, like there's gunfire.
Yeah, I think they're just shooting in the air.
Right, but still, it's not, you know.
Well, there's there's the horse unit has swords.
Oh yeah, they did. Yeah. But yeah, military's out, police are out, driving away the crowd, and then a flock of sheep enter they enter the church? I just read in my notes they enter the building.
Yeah, no, they just start. Yeah, they I think they make it into the building.
Okay. And screams and gunfire are happening and
Yeah,
credits.
yeah, you can hear the screaming and the gunfire.
Yeah.
All right, what does it mean?
I don't know. But I like the imagery and there's something about like, the nature of groupthink, crowdthink, sheep. I
Hmm.
don't know. There's something there. There's also like I don't know, Buñuel has been was attacked throughout his career for his portrayal of the church on screen. I assume that would overlap with maybe some of his personal opinions.
Yes.
So there is definitely some commentary there. I don't have a definitive here's what this one means on this particular movie.
I mean, the dinner party, the church, these are all sites of the Francoist ruling class.
There you go.
The violence and the need to keep order as so many rich people are stuck in a building again. And we
We
can't
hold
get in.
together our society when this many people of the elite ruling class are all stuck in one place.
I mean, what would we do?
The
Um,
ideology of the rich to keep a status quo so that their lifestyle is not interrupted.
I don't know.
I think by not making a definitive statement and letting you kind of talk it through or think it through as you watch the movie and experience it with somebody or listen to a podcast is kind of one of the hallmarks of Boonwell's kind of genius is to not just like, all right, let me spoon feed you the or have like a voiceover narration or something. Although if that was done by a talking sheep, I'd be kind of interested at the end of this movie. A sheep just like stops in the middle of the flock and starts talking to the camera. I like that it's not just like, here's what I was trying to tell you, like in a monologue scene or something. Like it's put on the screen and it's up to you to kind of put this puzzle together.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not a hand-holding movie. I think if we knew the context very deeply, we'd be able to pull that out a lot, like something going on better, but we don't actually.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, I think that sounds about right.
Is this a leftist film, Isaac?
Yeah. I don't know his personal politics. I probably should have looked this up.
I mean, I know he trained, what is some of the stuff I've read about him? It's been a minute, but I know he was like really into hypnotism as like a teenager.
This does not surprise me.
It's not surprising, but it doesn't really help untangle what's going on here. Obviously very strong ties to the surrealist movement, which wasn't exactly a let's make everybody comfortable and accept the status quo. He had some very definitive thoughts on, the Francoist dictatorship that was going on. Yeah, I would say he's probably
Here's okay. I should just say, Buñuel's a Marxist. So yeah, this is a leftist movie. Like politically, I was saying I don't know a lot about his politics. I don't know a lot about it, but no, I'm the little bit I've read is that he's a Marxist. I don't really know exactly what his trajectory within that is. So I like to be able to say a little bit more. If you're in the Spanish, if you're Spanish and you're of the generation that would have dealt with the Spanish Civil War, those differences can make a very big difference, right? Were you with the poem or with the Communist Party? But like, yeah, he's a Marxist. It's
well.
he's
Then
a
also, I found a couple quotes from him where it says, though his controversial political leanings had fallen all his life, when he was asked about his communist beliefs, he simply replied, "I'm a Spanish Republican."
well, when's the interview?
That's a good point too. It was part of a collection called Buñuel, A Life in Film. From Madrid to Mexico, Buñuel, A Life in Film. Not sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it's a review. It's a review of a book from the review is from 2023, March of this past year, but it's a book review, which contains it's a review. It's an article that reviews a few books, including the autobiography of Louis Buñuel, My Last Sigh. That's a great title.
The Last Sigh.
But I
a
mean, that
little.
could also mean something differently, like you said, if it's in the time period of, is he saying, and is this,
That's not well. So saying you're a Spanish Republican does not contradict being a communist. It means that you were on the side. I assume that means you're on the side. I mean, once again, I don't know this politics very deeply, but it means you're on the side of the Republic during the Spanish Civil War, and you're against the Franco and the generals.
right?
So as a broad alignment, that makes sense because that was the side that the various the official Communist Party, the POM anarchists, and sort of just standard sort of non-radical forces that were for democracy would have been for. I said at the top, I was sort of avoiding like getting into his politics. So at the top of the episode, I was sort of talking about like the broader sense of sort of leftness that you
Mhm.
can feel in this period. But this is a movie that is by somebody who is on the radical left more definitively.
Yeah.
And it's a leftist movie. It's a savage political critique. I think, the reason I sort of hold back is, I mean, a lot of the British movies that I like in this period are done by people who are not necessarily going to be as radical, but also have sort of like a savage critique of let's say the British ruling class. So you don't need to necessarily be. I mean, certainly you can be influenced by the spirit in the air without necessarily being, as much in movements. But like, I think with him he is a leftist.
I think so too. And also, yeah, I was thinking like this, I should have dove in deeper because there's a lot of interesting ins and outs. I was looking at his film career, but also I think there's a parallel or maybe intertwined kind of political career he had as well that I'm seeing, which, it evolved with him as the times evolved and as his work evolved. There's a book called Louis Buñuel, The Red Years, 1929 to 1939, which is kind of interesting. It's quoted as saying the turbulent years of the 1930s were of profound importance in the life of Spanish film director Louis Buñuel. He joined the surrealist movement in 29, but by 32 had renounced it and embraced communism. During the Spanish Civil War, 36 to 39, he played an integral role in disseminating film propaganda in Paris for the Spanish Republican cause.
Right.
So, yeah, so he's not just on the sidelines either. He's active and participating,
Right.
both through like his own body physically and then also his own art as well. So bravo.
Yeah, no, this is one of the most definitive leftist movies we've watched in a while, actually.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I think we will probably be revisiting some Louis Buñuel films within the life of the podcast, but that is not what we are watching for our next episode. Isaac, what have we got in front of us for next time?
Well, it's our 3-year anniversary. Yes, it's really been that long. Has it been 3 years?
Yeah, because we started
Oh, wow.
right before COVID hit, remember?
Yeah, goddamn.
January 2020.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So that means it's time to maybe pick up some movies that we've been meaning to do for a really, really long time. And we're gonna do 2 episodes of this, and the first one is Aaron's pick. And what are you gonna pick?
I picked because of my obsession with the 60s and 70s in American cinema. It never will end because there's still a never-ending list of films I need to watch. Robert Kramer is a fascinating director who I've only seen his film Ice, which we'll be talking about a little bit. But his most well-known movie is called Milestones from 1975. I haven't seen it yet, but the description, it sounds like a Robert Altman-esque multi-character portrait of what does it say here? Those who sought radical solutions to social problems in the United States during the 60s and 70s, cutting back and forth between 6 major storylines and more than 50 characters, exploring the lifestyles and attitudes of the American left during the period following the Vietnam War. Couldn't be more up our alley, I don't think.
Nope.
Nope.
I thank you for giving me something to do on my vacation.
You're welcome. It's 195 minutes, so it'll take a second.
Good God.
But knowing how he does the pacing, like I've only seen Ice, like I said, but I feel like it's going to feel like a mere 2-hour movie, the way that he does his storytelling. So I think it'll grab us right away. But
I hope so. So yeah, no, I'm being mean, but no, like I'm looking forward to it.
And I'm here. I'm here at my parents' place, and they were alive and active during that period. So maybe I can get them to watch it with me.
Oh yeah, I would love to hear some of their thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
Kramer too, if folks are unfamiliar with sort of his work, like Milestones is listed as drama and documentary as the genres, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know too much about the making of that one, but the way he filmed Ice from 1970, it's listed as drama and science fiction. But if you just threw that on for somebody who doesn't know anything about like the film or what it's about or anything else, it's gonna seem like a found footage film, possibly documentary of underground revolutionary group that's struggling with like internal strife versus urban guerrilla tactics, fighting to get back against a fascist regime that pretty much looks like Nixon's America. And plays as a thriller, but at the same time, he mixes that cinema verite with drama to make it, I don't know, a very heightened sense of realism.
Yeah.
But before we officially sign off, be sure to rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you are using. And if you do enjoy the show, tell a friend or two or three. And if you love the show and feel so inclined and able, we have a Patreon page set up as well. Just follow the links in the show notes. And until next time, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Isaac. And continue to stay safe out there while you protest for Palestine. Don't let up. The genocidal violence isn't going anywhere. The degree to which this entire conflict started in the first few weeks or the first few days with an attempt to get the Egyptians to open up the border, which is basically an attempt to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And now you see in the Israeli media and, like the continuing trial balloons and, a genuine effort to make Gaza unlivable so that, someone will have to clean up the Israeli mess. And, well, you can't let them into Israel, so I guess they're going to have to go somewhere. Well, I wonder if there's a country that will take them. It sort of shows the sheer level of delusion of a lot of the political class in Israel, but also is one more reason why we need to be fighting hard for both a ceasefire and a just ending to this conflict. And, well, to settle colonialism. So, yeah, stay safe.